Hello, everybody. We're just letting people into the room, and we'll get started in a little bit. Usually, by about 5 minutes after we start to get a decent amount of people to come, and we have a pretty good set of people who signed up for today. So, looking forward to getting this started. And thanks, everybody, for sharing your time with us. On mute. All right. So we're about 5 minutes in and we will get started. I'm sure we'll be letting people in for the next few minutes and then going for the full hour. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I am Phil Dillard, your host, founder of Thruline Networks. I'm going to go through a little bit of basic housekeeping and then introduce our speakers and get this thing going. So basically, we're encouraging people to remain muted and stay off your camera unless you're actively speaking, except for our special guest speakers. We have a great mix of people who are speaking as well as who are in the audience. So there are a lot of people in the audience who have some expertise in this topic. We have some really great people attending. So I expect that this will turn into a lot of conversation, a lot of shared information and insights. Please feel free to send a question or a comment anytime in the chat. We're actively monitoring the chat, and we'll try and work those comments and questions into the conversation as we work through the conversation with everybody who's here. I would like to then go to a little bit about the focus of what we're talking about, where we're going to start, where we hope to go, and introduce our guests. So, our conversation today is all about starting with the farmer. And we're thinking a lot about the regenerative family farmer, the smaller farmer, as opposed to a large corporate line crop farm. We're thinking a lot about regenerative farming and regenerative agriculture in California and broadly across the US. We won't limit the examples just to that. Uh, but we are starting with who is having the problem, what are their challenges, and how can we serve there? Our objective of this conversation is to share some experience across the spectrum from practitioners, from innovators, from investors, and from other experts who we have in the room to get clear on what the problem is at hand, the source and the challenges of those problems, and where there are opportunities for innovators and entrepreneurs and experts to bring value now so that everyone ends up with what we want, which is more nutritious food, healthy and prosperous farmers, great usage of land and water so that the ecosystems that we care about are growing and thriving throughout this activity. So, with that, I'm going to just again talk about the agenda. We're going to basically introduce the guest speakers. We'll talk through some of their goals and their experiences, and then we'll get into a conversation about the problem and some of the opportunities. We hope to end with some key takeaways and next steps so that everyone can actually become more and more engaged in the building of the type of a system that we want to see, because there is an impression that the current system isn't doing so well for us, and we'll cite some facts about it, and then we'll talk about how we make that better. So with that, for the folks I guess everybody here is already playing by the rules, so we don't have to remind people about the basic housekeeping. So I'm going to start and introduce our guests. So I will start with, okay, yeah. So we're supposed to say who you are, what you do, a little bit about your why, and a fun fact. So I'll model it. Phil Dillard, founder of Thruline Networks. I live in San Francisco. I'm from Philadelphia, but I grew up in South Jersey, and I'll tell you a bit about my why behind regenerative agriculture. My family has been from that region for a long time, and we had family farmers who were in South Jersey in the Garden State, which was the breadbasket for the Philadelphia region, that had all these different farms. And as we moved out of the city to the suburbs, we were always surrounded by farms. There were strawberries and blueberries and apple orchards, and there was a dairy farm right at the edge of town. And we would roll into the dairy farm, even as kids on field trips from school, and we'd see them milk the cows, and we'd see them pasteurize the milk, and we'd see them turn it into ice cream, and we'd come home with great ice cream. We would pick our own fruit in the summers with my mom, and we would make blueberry jam and strawberry jelly and grape jelly and all these different things from the fruit we picked. So we were never disassociated from where our food came from. We drove past farmers' carts, and we had family who were growers. I didn't understand when people said that they were disassociated from their food and they didn't know where it came from, or that they were like not small farmers who were feeding their communities. But it's become increasingly important to where we are today, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So, city kid who moved to the suburbs and learned a lot about being in the country, and I love being in the dirt. So that's my fun fact. I will pass it to Julia.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited to dive into the conversation. I guess my fun fact. Well, I'm here. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area right now. My fun fact or history that brings me to this. I grew up mostly in Switzerland, and so a little bit like Phil, I grew up perhaps just with a proximity to nature, to incredible nature. And I used to go hiking all the time. I used to go try and scramble up hills to find the best wild little strawberries up there that one could get and just enjoy the deliciousness of them. Um, so I have focused on climate and nature-based entrepreneurship, which has really taken me into this space of food and ag. I think it has huge potential to realign us more in balance with nature in general. And I have a desire to help contribute to building place-based regenerative economies. So that's sort of big picture on me. I started a venture last year. It's called Rootstock. At its core, it's a platform to help grow a healthier local food system here in the Bay Area and neighboring farming communities. And so we partner directly with really exceptional regenerative growers of fresh produce. We started really with a focus on berries, and we've broadened it, but we still think of berries as our core heritage. And we're really working to shorten on market access. So to shorten the supply chain, to connect them more directly with local consumers and communities very proximate here in the Bay Area, and to improve the economics. So I'm happy to share more about what that looks like, but I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks much, Joey. Jeff, you want to go next?
Great. Thank you, Phil. Thanks to everyone for joining. My name is Jeff Chapin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Carbon Wave. We take a regenerative nature-based solution, which is this sargassum seaweed, which is out of control in the Caribbean, and we repurpose it for products in farming and other places. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. My why is really climate and oceans and the intersection between the two. And I really wanted to do something that if we're going to have a large solution to climate, it has to involve the oceans because the terrestrial land use cases are so important and so needed that the ocean, which has absorbed 93% of all the heat and carbon on this planet, need to find a way to take the temperature down literally and figuratively with the pressure that the oceans are feeling. and its ability to absorb carbon from the air. So we started this because this is the largest seaweed bloom on the planet by factors of 1,000 or more. And we said, why wouldn't we start with this? The ocean is already trying to heal itself with this sargassum seaweed. It absorbs carbon, it creates biodiversity hotspots, and it's wonderful. But when it packs into bays, that's where it causes terrible harm. It destroys ecosystems, coral reefs, creates methane. And so we have a moral obligation to do something with this at scale and prevent it from just rotting, turn it into regenerative products. So we make our primary one as a biostimulant for crops that helps crops increase yield. And so what we can do is we have so much of this, we can concentrate up all the good things that are in there and really make a much more cost-effective biostimulant. Lower cost, lower amounts per acre or hectare, and better yields. And we have some pretty great data about it because it's actually kind of working, that we're taking nature, we're harnessing it, getting it back on the fields, and turning it around to help food security and climate with more crops from less land. We've been invested in by the World Bank and others, and Global Fund for Coral Reefs, etc. I guess my other fun fact is, I don't know how fun it is, but I'm the chairman of the board of Prime Coalition, which is a group that's helping family offices invest in big climate companies that are too risky for traditional venture capital. So that's not Carbon Wave, but I enjoy that work because I feel like I can make a difference that way too.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Great introduction. Zoe, do you want to go next?
Yes, hello, I'm Zoe Samuel, and I'm at Starshot Capital, which is um, a VC fund, venture capital fund, investing in early stage climate companies, primarily across the built environment industry and relevantly for today, food and agriculture. And so I come from the UK, as you can probably tell, and I'm not just doing a bit. My why is that I really loved hiking in the Scottish Highlands as a little kid, and I don't want the beautiful purple heather to go away. I want it it will go away if things get too hot up there. And it might look like Italy, but we've already got in Italy, so I think we should keep Scotland as the way it is. My fun fact is that I have in the past, back when dairy was something that we have a family farm in the UK, and back when dairy was something that you could make money doing, albeit not very much. We had a milking parlor and we had 300 cows. And I did just once, because you do need to be a lot stronger and bigger than I was at the time, milk all of them. And never wanted a shower more in my life. But I think there is something rather magical about seeing, about really experiencing that up close. And to Phil's point, a lot of children in the UK apparently think milk comes from a carton. And so my parents would at that time have kids come out from the city to see the cows being milked and see where their food really comes from.
Well, thanks, Zoe. Great to get to know everybody a little bit. So let's kind of jump into it. The premise for the conversation is that we all want the same thing. We want healthy food and water. We want healthy soils. We know that food is medicine, and we believe that regeneratively grown food is stronger, healthier food for our bodies. The question is the challenges of how to get there, because there are pressures on those who are growing the food, right? And we broke these down in our prep call to the major factors that are out there. We first start with things like power and water. We're just getting the access of operating the farm and getting the water to it. Then there's actually challenges around land access and water access and distribution. Then there are inputs like labor and fertilizer or soil enhancements or equipment or the ability to actually process and have an efficient supply chain for these different products. Now, we started simple talking about power and water because we understood that the prices of power and water were expected to increase significantly for California farmers, and we were looking for ways to address it. But as we got more into the story, we see that there are a number of these issues and they're kind of intertwined. So this is where we wanted to start the conversation. And since we were starting with the farmer, we wanted to start with Julia and and her point of view about what you see when you look at the bioregion, when you look at a local region, and you're trying to grow these small and healthy farms, and how are they seeing these challenges? Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I've been really diving in the California context. And California is at somewhat of a tipping point in terms of consolidation. So a handful of very large farms really account for 60 to 80% plus of ag sales, depending on the category. So you can think of kind of a couple of very large leafy green growers at something like 80% share, a couple of different berry producers. So that's a little bit of the context to remember to keep in mind. I believe we need a thriving, diverse grower ecosystem kind of above and around that. And I've been putting particular emphasis on speaking and spending time with smaller farms that I think have natural competitive advantages in regenerative ag for many reasons. They can experiment more. They can really prioritize quality over quantity. They can be more nimble. They can, have a specialty, but also really face huge challenges.
Hey, Ellen, Nick here. Do you have a quick second?
Yeah, what's going on?
I just spoke with the.
Oh, all right. I think we're getting in. So yeah, part of what I look at is how do we empower small and mid-sized growers to kind of punch above their weight. There's a when you think about grower economics, there's a national stat that gets thrown around a lot, which is that farmers receive only 16 cents on the consumer dollar. That's from the USDA ERS, and it's powerful, right? Because the rest is basically, so if 16 cents go to the farm, the rest, the 84 cents, goes to processing, packaging, transport, wholesale, retail, food service, labor, marketing, you name it, all the things that Phil was starting to list out. This is an average that masks a ton of variance, and so you kind of have to get down to a local level to understand what's really going on. And so if I zoom down into California berry growers, there's a report that UC Davis did, which really shines a light on basically growers are losing money once the full cost is accounted, or just about, right? And that's even when maybe they're earning 100,000 an acre in revenue, but the costs are just growing so much, and the ability to charge premium is really challenging. So yeah, I think maybe that's just some context. I think regenerative agriculture has huge opportunity to actually to improve the farm economics, but it doesn't happen overnight, and so there's a need for creative capital and risk sharing solutions with the growers as they're transitioning through that, and as they're trying to lead in a different way. One last point is really just can't emphasize enough that risk is kind of pushed downhill to the growers. So think of kind of just, the big, very convoluted supply chain that we've managed to build up. I keep drawing these value chains, and I keep redrawing them because, it's so complex between the wholesales and the institutional buyers and the distributors and the different grower shippers and all the different routes that things have to market and through to eventually the end consumer. And through all of that, a lot of risk is kind of pushed down to the grower in a way that's not sustainable.
I definitely want to get to that risk part, but I have a question to slip over to Jeff in terms of talking about costs. If we are trying to help the growers, they're going to increase revenues or decrease costs. Can you talk a little bit, Jeff, about where you see opportunities in both of those cases, and then maybe we can come back to Julia and then circle back to Zoe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Julia, I love the focus on the farmer, right? Everyone has to start there. Those are the groups that are so important. And so how do we help them with that risk that you bring up? And it's also a broader social justice question, right? I mean, with climate change, we're increasing the risks to farmers. With water, drought situations, all these are making a hard job even harder. And in the global south, for example, where we operate, where this seaweed band has just gone out of control, that's because of climate change and because of runoff from pollutants in rivers and over food production, right? Coming out of the Amazon basin, the nitrogen fertilizer and all these things. So it's like, and that just creates a whole nother set of problems in the Caribbean where beaches and tourism are hurt, and it's even harder to get clean, fresh water because of this. And so we created a holistic solution to address the risks to farmers of that. Let's clean that up, fix that, collect it per the moral obligation we have to not let it rot and create harm, but yet have all the benefits when it's in the open ocean. But don't let it get inshore and rot. Protect the beaches that are important to local folks for tourism and jobs, and then take this and turn it into something that helps farmers. How do we do that? We touch 30,000 tons of this a year. We're going to grow to 100,000 tons, and we're going to collect it. And we found a way to compress the liquid fraction and concentrate that up so that specific profiles this is a weak seaweed in a lot of ways compared to kelp and others. It's not as nutritious, but because we have so much of it, we concentrate up the laminarins, the mannitols, the amino acids, the things that farmers really care about. And we recently were tested basically what it does is it increases yield anywhere from 5 to even up to 25% for the farmer. But that only matters if it's cheap, because they have to have, if they're going to spend the money, they better get the yield back out of it. So it has to be 5 times to 16 times the increased yield that it costs to put it on the field. Otherwise, for the farmer, that's not a good bet. It's too risky and money's short. And in times where we have increased drought and increased heat waves, this also conveys a protectant to the crops. And this applies across crops that feed the world, like corn, soy, wheat, and then veggies and tomatoes and things like that, and blueberries and all these different plants. They need a lot of the same nutritional benefits. And so we created something that increases yield, but does so at a much lower cost, because this is a waste product in many people's views. We don't have to grow the kelp. We don't have to put hatcheries to work and put lines in and get permits. This is massively scaled already because of what the ocean is doing. And we're just protecting the land. We get paid to do that. But then we're the only ones who can turn it into something that really works well. So the key is we have so much of it, we can decrease the cost, and we concentrate it up so much that we are as effective or better than most all the biostimulants at this. And we have this from a big distributor in the United States who tested us against 60 different biostimulants. And they said, what we're doing here is better and at half the application rate. So instead of a quart, you put a pint on an acre. And we have this good effect for farmers that is so low cost, it makes sense. And then the last thing I'll say we're doing is we're also saying if we're so confident in the data for the crops, put our money where our mouth is. So we're creating a fund that gives the product to farmers, lets them use it, even pays them a little bit for the hassle of a control plot or what have you. And then they only pay back when they have gotten more value than the product costs. And generally, like in tomatoes in California, the farmers for the last 2 years, through a third-party test, Leading Harvest documented this, they got about $960 of profit. And it only costs about $90 to put it on the fields. So now we're starting to give it out to farmers, let them get the yield of $960, pay us $90 and keep all the profits. And this is how we take natural solutions, turn them into something that works. And then lastly, we're making use of the pulp too. We've made an emulsifier for cosmetics out of it. We've made a leather. We're looking at biochar, all sorts of ways that we can take this solution and not just do it in Mexico where we are now, but expanding now to Belize and to Barbados and other island nations. That also increases the supply so we can bring this globally. We do ship it globally in a very condensed form so that it's efficient. But this is the efficiency that this panel has been talking about that we need to make sure that farmers are bearing less risk and doing it in a way that's natural, organic, et cetera.
And this is what I like to describe as a broader perspective of regeneration, right? Because if I think about it in the very local sense, what did nature do inside of a small ecosystem on the prairie with the buffalo? Buffalo roamed around, they'd eat it at one place and they'd drop it another. It stayed in that spot. But once you start to take something from one place and move it to another, now you've broken the chain. Or once you put too much into an ecosystem, then you have overpopulation in that ecosystem. You need to extract extract it out. And I see, Jeff, your group is kind of extracting it out from the ocean and bringing it back to the land so it can regenerate the land. Can you talk a little bit about how this displaces petroleum-based fertilizers? Because I don't know how well people understand that the nitrogen-based, petroleum-based fertilizers operate and how you actually can help change the economics of the situation by providing your soil enhancement.
Yeah, I mean, with the war in Ukraine and all that tragedy that's happening, it's one of the side effects that is terrible is, of course, the price of fertilizer. And so farmers around the world are experiencing that. And so what this product, to your question, Phil, allows the farmer to do is we're not putting more nitrogen on the fields by putting our Sarga Power biostimulant on the fields. It's not doing that. It's like a vitamin. Think of it as it helps the plant use what is in the soil more efficiently and be more robust and survive heat and drought. And so farmers can use less nitrogen fertilizer. The NPK equation can be reduced. A lot of farmers put too much on because they're concerned and there's too much risk if it's too little. So that's absolutely understandable. So, and that's part of, ironically, what's creating the Amazon basin runoff is that farmland upstream has too much fertilizer on it. We don't need all of that, but yet farmers, understandably, don't want to risk it. So this sort of captures the excess NPK, turns it into a sargassum seaweed, and we put it back on fields. And when they're using this biostimulant, they can, in the literature, it has been proven that you can reduce fertilizer by 20 to 30%. Now, farmers might start at 5% or 10%, but they can feel more confident that they can reduce their fertilizer a bit, reduce their input costs and climate, by the way, climate impact, but they can reduce their costs a bit and start to and still see the same or better yields because we're getting 5 to 15 to 25% more yield on those crops. So that's another way that we try to help farmers, but it's understanding that it's a long-term soil cycle. So you have to be mindful of what 5-year trend is, of course. But at least in the near term, there's a lot of benefit to that trade-off.
I want to yes and that. One of the companies that we've invested in at Starshot is a company called IMEO. And so farmers in the US are typically putting about $200 per acre of fertilizer. And obviously, the more that you can reduce that number, you reduce the climate impact and you improve the margin. And, IMEO has a microbe that a lot of the fertilizer doesn't go into the bit of the corn that you want to sell. It goes into the stalks and the bits that you're just like, oh, that's waste. It's on the field afterwards. And this is a microbe that helps it rot back into the soil and reclaim those nutrients. So very complementary to what Jeff is doing, and not competitive, which is always our favorite thing when things work together. And, obviously, if you're a farmer, to Julia's point about risk, what if I try this and it doesn't work and I haven't put enough fertilizer, as Jeff says? What if I try this and it doesn't work and I have one bad year? I'm a small farmer, I get wiped out. So you do have to, for example, one of the big offtake agreements that IMEO has signed is with Grover Salinas, which is affiliated with Chipotle, where the risk can be taken on by Chipotle. Of making this switch. And yes, you do also sometimes need several years. So it's a very exciting thing where you can reduce those input costs, because what you can't do is charge the consumer more. Like, we will not invest in any company that requires a green premium for the end product. Obviously, I'm sitting here in Berkeley, there are certainly people here who will pay a premium for, the organic artisanal free range lemon or that sort of thing. But, the average person shouldn't feel judged for the fact that they can't do that because they're trying to make rent and not worry too much about this sort of thing. So how do we make their system better in a way that doesn't require the farmer and the end consumer, who in a way are the two most exposed people in the whole system, to be required to stump up more money that they just haven't got?
And that's the tricky conundrum, right? The same cost, the same challenges that increase the price to the farmer are the same challenges that increase the price to the consumer. And the consumer wants the healthier product. The farmer wants to deliver the healthier product. But there are some things in the system that are challenging that. Now, the first thing, there's a question that we had in the audience. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to let whoever wants to handle it first. And the question was really about water and power costs. Now, from the macro perspective, the conversations that that we've been having with people in multiple spaces. We talked about this at Bloomberg NEF conference, at grid conferences, and with people who are talking about regenerative ag in particular, was that there is an expectation in California for the prices for power to increase up to 10% this year and each year following. And water rights and water access are different regional challenges because there are different fights over who's going to get which water and where the water is going to go. Across the country, because of federal policy around energy and because of how they're pricing new policy entering into the system, there is also increased expected costs of power. And this is even before you start talking about the additional pressure of the AI boom and electrification on what was a flat demand curve in the grid structure that is now going up at such a rapid rate that it makes all the people in the energy industry very, very nervous, right? So there are a lot of different factors that are driving up the cost of power and water. But if the question is, how does a local farmer address those and how do we minimize those costs? I think maybe we could talk about that. I'm not sure if this is better to start with Julia or with Zoe, but Julia, I see you coming up. Go ahead.
I would love to hear from Julia first, but I do have a point on it.
Sure, I'll go first. So I think it's actually, I see it as tons of opportunities in some way. Maybe I try to see the opportunity in challenges. Water, I mean, the shift to regenerative agriculture is so important, partly because of the pressure on water and the degree of land degradation, but also regenerative practices allow water infiltration to improve and resilience of crops to water, water scarcity to improve. So it's part of the reason that we need regenerative agriculture. I think there are other ways to think about water from a farm's perspective. How can I be more water efficient? Does go into precision irrigation and different ways. Instead of spraying the water up in the air, can we be very, exactly what we need and no more than what we need? I think there are also opportunities to actually lean into dry farming and grow crops that are more drought resilient and require less water in the first place. So these are some of the thoughts on water. I think on power, where my mind goes is some of the opportunities around solar energy and agrivoltaics as a way to actually bring another income stream to farms if done right, by having solar panels, a kind of above, sometimes creating helpful shade for some of the crops. And so that's an opportunity. Or for me, where I'm working closer to the market access, it's a huge opportunity for a farm to have cold storage, because cold storage extends the time they have to get a perishable crop like strawberries into the market. And so there's some cool stuff being done around solar powered cold storage that can really, really help farms.
Zoe, you had a comment?
Yes, I think that's really important. The question of, there's a symbiotic component here where that shade that those solar panels are providing is also retaining water in the soil. Every canal in California should have solar panels over it, reduces evaporation. We should get a lot smarter. Like there's an opportunity for farmers to do things like get paid or make revenue from allowing fields to flood at certain times of year or doing water storage on their farms. A friend of mine who works a lot with agriculture in India said that one of the crazy things is you do get very perverse incentives where it's like, oh, I put in a pond or a reservoir on my farm and then they get paid for that and then they pump all this water into it, which actually was in the ground where it can't evaporate so easily. So you have to align your incentives correctly. But I think that when it comes to water, there's some really strange perverse incentives. Like if you don't use all of your water rights the next year, they're like, oh, this farm only needed 90% of their rights and you can lose it. And also you have to deal with things like for the Colorado River is, across multiple state lines and you have all these other stakeholders who have to be aligned. But 80% of the water in California goes to farming and 20 to towns and cities and things. And when you think where those towns and cities are, we shouldn't really be using any of it. Like we're I mean, I can't see the ocean from here, but my neighbor can. And, there's all sorts of other opportunities for using water more intelligently in places where, rather than getting it from Colorado, we could be desalinating water over here, that sort of thing. So I think that we have an awful lot of water infrastructure to build, that should be regarded not as a cost, but as a terrific opportunity. And let's bear in mind also that in all of our systems, so in water, energy, and food, they are all 30 to 40% waste. So we should stop, one of the key things is let's make better use of what we've actually got. And if we could cut that waste in half, I think Phil, that's your sort of target that you mentioned earlier when we were chatting before. Think how much easier that would make it.
Yeah, I think so. You make a couple really great points. And I'll give an example and I'll come back to the waste point. Last week, I was at the X Prize Wildfire semifinals presentation at PG&E's headquarters. And the CEO of PG&E was talking about things that they were doing to reduce wildfire. And people were talking about solutions that they had. But what was really interesting in this regard was there was a team from the city government of Huntington Beach, and they were talking about how wildfire is a major risk, but also what they were doing in terms of water access because of the fights upstream that you were talking about. They said we need to find better ways to collect the water that we can get and take good care of the water that we've got so that we can use as much of it as we use as much as we can for the things that we need and don't waste it on the things that we don't. I bring that up because I think there's opportunities for innovators to think, can I have better water delivery systems? Can I have better water transmission systems? Can I use solar power to pump the water instead of relying on petroleum-based solutions? Can I have a collaborative with other folks to drive the power? Can I do land remediation so that we have a better system for the local watershed? We heard this at a local ranch near Pescadero, where they were talking about the water rights challenges between the people on the hill and the people on the ground. So from Julia's perspective, I see there's definitely a lot of it matters where you are in the region. And I think Jeff has seen this in different parts of the world where like the different growers have different access to water and power and such to be able to help themselves move forward. But a key component here is innovators have an opportunity to identify a challenge and turn that into something that is significantly impactful right off the bat. And I see, Julia, you come off mute, and I'm curious what can.
I just feel like I need to, as much as innovators have an opportunity, and I was coming in optimistic, this also really hits on the equity and justice challenges, right? So there is only so much you can do with certain land, and land access is a real challenge. And land access where the land has the right water access and there is not, salinization or toxic chemicals in the water or issues that are really challenging to work with as a farm. That cost of that land is only going up, and the ability for diverse, smaller, mid-sized growers to have reliable access to that land is very challenging.
Yeah, and
So is that?
Oh, sorry, can I jump
Go
in?
ahead.
So if you look at conflicts in the Middle East and in Sudan, like it's overwhelmingly water is a triggering factor. I mean, the fact that Tehran is running out of water is a big factor in what's happening there. But I think also not only can not all land is created equal from a problem point of view, it's also from a solution point of view. I mean, Jeff mentioned natural solutions, and I just put a link in the chat to one of my favorites, which is look after the beavers. Beaver dams help keep water in the soil and maintain the biodiversity of forests. But I'm like, if I'm the guy who owns the forest up the hill from your farm, I don't care about your farm. And so how do you sort of give me the incentive to look after my bit? When many of the benefit, like my bit is now reduced risk of wildfire, great. But I'm now storing all this water up here that maybe you're annoyed that it wasn't coming down to you in the way that you had expected it to.
Yeah, and I think that leads to another question that says, who actually owns this problem? Is this a problem of the commons where the people are going to choose? Is this a problem of policy where some sort of legislator is going to debate certain things out? Is this a problem of wealthy landowners and thinking about their legacy and the great transition? And it's not just dollars, but it's actually the continued legacy of that family as a rancher, or their continued gift of the natural beauty of a certain region. Now, I know that Jeff's has dug into this a little bit on how corporations are actually helping to make some of this happen. And we've dug into it a little bit with families. But I'm curious if you guys have any points that you add to, like, how do you tackle the who owns this problem piece, and make it so that, there might be people who are policy people. There might be people who are resource scientists or conservationists, example. Jeff, you came off mute.
Well, I just think this is a very important question about access to land. And to broaden it globally, we're losing arable land globally. I mean, the continents that are suffering the most, I mean, really, Africa losing to the desert expanding, right? How do you keep, you got to stop losing land where it's possible to grow. And one of the things we're trying to do is think about the pulp from the seaweed, how it can become a biochar and bring nutrients into the soil. And then the liquid fraction can help the plant grow. Without any extra passes, by the way. You can put it in drip lines, or you can just, but that to me is like even the bigger issue. California is so hard to solve for because all the land is really spoken for, right? And so when I think about how do we feed the growing world, which hopefully the population is slowing, but how do you do that? We can't do that and keep losing land to desertification. We have to take care of the land that we do have, not let it get poor in nutrients, and take the best advantage of it we can with plants that are robust, resilient, and healthy so that they can feed that world.
I think that's very important to consider. Like, it's okay to say I don't have to solve the whole thing. I'm good at private enterprise, so I'm a climate investor and I live in the VC space. But different pieces of this will be solved by different people. And I think a lot of the thing that those of us in climate, because maybe in our families or our home communities, we were like Cassandra the prophet, doomed to prophesy and never be believed. We feel like there aren't that many of us and that we have to do it all ourselves. And actually, there's like now several 100 million of us that care about this one way or another and are contributing one way or another. And so we're actually part of a mighty army of people who deeply care about solving this. And there's a sort of very racist tendency to assume that like folks in the global south don't have time to think about this because they're busy, doing whatever terrible dealing with their situations, and it's a sort of paternalistic way. They actually, on average, care more in the same way that communities of color and poorer folks in the US actually, on average, care more. And it's not just because they're on the sharp end, but I think they're just sort of more aware of maybe problems in the world. So I think it's okay to say this is like my lane, but you do have to then not be arrogant and kind of go to like, I'm better than the policy people because my thing is more effective, because there's nothing farmers hate more, and with justification. And that's wherever those farmers are when, the arrogant coastal elite stereotype, which exists for a reason, comes along and it's like, you hey, little farmer, I know what's best for you. And people who sound like me definitely need to stop doing that in the rest of the world. So, we have to come at it with humility.
And also when you look at, the loss of the Amazon, which in our world is meaningful for many reasons, but in our company, the excess fertilizer from farmlands upstream of the Amazon has created this bloom of sargassum to some extent. It's exaggerated it. And what we need to do is provide those farmers with, empower them with methods to grow more on the land that they have. So they earn more per hectare, per acre, but also as a global society, if we can do more with less land, that leaves more land for nature, people, and exigencies like that. Yeah.
I'm totally with you, Jeff. My personal seaweed journey started in the Philippines. We were talking about how to improve the lot of subsistence kelp farmers in the seaweed in the Philippines who were impacted by climate change. And then we started learning about problems in Japan. And then we started learning more about what was going on in the Caribbean. And then we heard from people in South America. I mean, there were people all around the world, as Zoe mentioned, who were part of this army that need to communicate better, need to collaborate better, and need some better tools. So I go back to the innovators out there and I say, if you're an innovator, right? Um, if you're an innovator, we'd love to hear that this is an opportunity for you. This is an opportunity to say, well, I don't know this part, but this is a lane that I can jump into. And this is something that I'm curious about. And now I have examples from this crew about some additional resources. We had I got a question from one of the attendees who's a kind of an expert in the space that we're talking about. I met her colleague from Ducks Unlimited, and I go, wait, I heard about you guys, but had forgotten how much really good conservation entities work to do certain things about bringing the sort of collaborations to the fore that we want to talk about. So, Lauren, do you want to come up? And I know you had a question and a comment. Can you pop up and come on video and share a little bit? How do you guys see this from the specifics of where you sit?
Yeah, I think relevant to, I'm going to kind of guess at your backgrounds a little bit because I missed the first half of our call. But we're a national nonprofit. We do conservation, wetlands conservation. So you may or may not be familiar. But in the last 8 to even really 10 years, we've started to look at corporate water stewardship and how, well, we've been traditionally funded through this government model of public grants and conservation dollars that come out of the federal conservation agencies and wildlife agencies. We've really started to look deeper into corporate value chains, corporate water stewardship, sustainability programming, especially in the last 3 years with the build out of hyperscalers to sort of see like what are the solutions we can provide because we're an implementer, so we're on the ground, we're building the project, we get the money, we build the project. Often it's not our land, it might be public land, it might be private land, and so we essentially are trying to be solution oriented in a way that allows corporations, and it doesn't have to be corporations. We have a large philanthropic community that supports this sort of work to say, okay, hey, we have an environmental impact, but we are ecologically conscious. We aren't going to just do the bare minimum compliance. What can we do? And so, if you're up on this topic, you know about water replenishment and water stewardship and those sorts of activities. And so we help companies do that. And there are ways that over time groups have come together in collaboration to have better tools, better accounting methods to make it more science-based so that you can account for it to your shareholder, your stakeholder, your investor, whoever it might be. And so that's been really successful, but we hope to continue to see that grow. We had a recent gift, which was interesting that a large I'm not going to name names or locations here, but a large company that traditionally was just looking for like this transactional benefit said, you know what, we're operating in this area. People are concerned about water and water scarcity. We are using water and we're being more technologically efficient over time. However, we're going to do the thing. And so they said, you know what, here we're going to make a contribution for you to do conservation work related to water in this region, in this where is our backyard. So I thought that was just, that was really within the last week. And so we're seeing this change monthly. But I guess it's for us, it's not innovative in the way that you do the work. Like we still need money for pumps and we still need money to, make sure the beavers are happy and irrigation is tech savvy as possible. But like we are trying to find better mechanisms to come together that kind of solves this in a different way because the philanthropy is not going to solve it and the government's not going to solve it. And we do need private sector. So that's some of what we've done through groups like the CEO Water Mandate, California Water Resilience Coalition, if you're familiar with that, and also the California Water Action Collaborative. I'll drop some links in, but those are essentially coalitions of NGOs, private companies, some water partners, irrigation districts, things like that we all kind of sit together and say, how can we co-invest in on the ground conservation, because we just can't fix this by ourselves. So that's my 2 cents for the moment.
Yeah. So I was at Google, which has, committed to replenish 120% of the water that they use. And so it's not that the hyperscalers don't care. It's that, they certainly have there might be a team who cares a lot about that, and then another team that has a totally different set of incentives. But the nice thing about entities like Google is they really don't want to be the villain. Like, Phil mentioned PG&E earlier. PG&E is the villain in 2 big Hollywood movies, Erin Brockovich and that Lost Bus movie that just came out. Like, you don't want that. So they don't want to be the villain. They do understand the PR value, and they do put out an annual sustainability report, and they do want to be able to say we replenish this many acres and that sort of thing. And the people who work on those reports are absolutely sincere in caring about these things. But also, financial innovation is innovation still. Like, if that's what you're good at, if you're really good at numbers, my God, do we need you in the climate movement? Like, there's been a really big problem in green biz of too many people who are all green and no biz. So I think you don't want to over-index on tech, I say, as an ex-Google person, and to the point of failing to index on networks and how money can move around. So and yes, good Lord, I'm sorry to hear that you're dealing with the federal government as a main funder in this current environment. What an exciting year you're having. I hope it gets a little more boring soon.
Yeah, thanks. So does our CEO. But we've done relatively well compared to others, I think.
Well done. But I think there's definitely money out there, and there's also a company that makes $400 billion a year can write you a check that's incredibly meaningful for you and to them is
exactly. And that is like we're trying to find the ways to ask those questions where it's a mutual benefit. If you're not a philanthropy, you're not a philanthropy, understood. So my program is there to help be solution oriented and craft science-based, validatable, whatever it might be, outcomes, benefits, credits, depending on the asset, that can function in the way that a company might need it to in their accounting.
So I thought, Julie, you had a point you wanted to make, right?
Yeah, I think I was just going to bring us back to the farmer. And I think one of the challenges today is that the supply chain through to the end consumer is too long and it is too opaque. And so what we really need to do is start to shift some of that, increase the differentiation of the supply chain and increase the transparency so that a farm that is growing in a way that the produce you're buying has a lower ecological footprint, let's call it, for broad based, and a higher nutrient density and a higher flavor profile, because all the good news is all this stuff is connected, right? The farms that are farming with obsessive focus on the soil and water efficiency and ecological stewardship and biodiversity, those are the strawberries where you can truly taste the difference. They are amazing. And so it doesn't have to be there's a real win-win here, like for the consumer at the end to return to their connection with nature and the flavor and the nutrient density. There's an awesome organization called Audacious that's really building out data around the nutrient density so that there can be more transparency for consumers. And I just kind of wanted to make that point because I agree with you, Zoe, that affordability is a real challenge. But I do think we have to move away from commodity everything's subsidized as well, right? Like the farm bill is driving subsidies to a certain type of commodities in a way that the economics and the prices are actually very distorted today. And so I think it's okay if some segments who can pay are able to pay more in order to actually strengthen the grower economics so that there is an incentive flywheel that can take off. But the only way they will pay more is if they can trust that what they're getting is actually the lower footprint and the higher flavor and the higher health that they expect it to be for the higher dollar. So that gets us into the world of certifications and labels and, going from organic to there's already a number of different certifications around organic, and we have a number of different around regenerative on top of that. And I think consumers, it's a very confusing landscape. And so there's a real need to build trust back into the supply chain as well.
And I think an interesting addition to that is that people can get that trust without the certification, but with the experience. Right. I think about my local farmers market. I live in San Francisco. I walk down and I ask every grower which one of them was regenerative. And the first two of them said, I said, how do you grow your food? They said, the first two guys said, we put water on it and it grows. And the third one said, we're organic. And the fourth one says, we're working towards organic certification. And the fifth one, Lupita and her husband Gonzalo, who I now buy all my groceries from every week for a bag of like $15 of groceries for the week. They talked about all the things they're doing to make their to reduce inputs and to make the food more nutrient dense and how they care about their food. And the food tastes better and all of those things. And it just made a very easy purchasing decision. So if we, through some sort of innovation, can create regional engagement systems that allow people to have that experience and then say, wow, I notice a difference. I feel better. I feel healthier. I enjoy eating vegetables that I didn't used to like. Those little things they're the little steps towards the impact that are different than the bigger ones that are how do we get to a right impact system? How do we wrestle with the right measurement metrics? I think that those are very exciting and potentially highly valuable for the folks that we want to talk about. I know we only have a minute or two left. I wanted to give everybody a shot for a parting shot on key takeaway or key success factors on how to be part of a thriving systems. And I would just end with this. There are a number of different examples of where individuals or organizations have just started to go out and do. And I'm going to put the rest of them in the chat so that people have them afterwards. But consider that if you think that there's something wrong with the system, that it doesn't take that much to actually start the change that's required to make the system change so that which used to be the bad system can actually be replaced by a better one. So I'm going to hand off for everybody else for a quick run around in the order that we started. So I've got Julia, Jeff, and Zoe.
Oh, just a takeaway for me is around we need more collaboration, and we really need to look at this as system level opportunity and need. I think it's too easy to have lots of point solutions and we all put our blinders on. Thank you.
I would just say, this is a great group on this call and lots of brains and capacity around the table. Let's think about ways to collaborate, whether it's through funding mechanisms, ways to bring products to farmers, ways to help farmers with land access, Julia, and think about ways we can help each other with the various missions. I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs on this call. And so let's just commit to being collaborative. And Phil, I believe information will be exchanged so we can all share. Yeah. So thank you.
In that spirit, I just dropped my LinkedIn in the chat. If anyone else would do the same, that'd be brilliant. Always excited, especially to hear from innovators of, potential portfolio companies. My parting thought is that, we are part of nature and, we are a nature-based solution. And if the system is not regenerative, it damages us to the point about health and nutrition and so on, but also it's going to be more exploitative. It's going to be more unjust. It's going to be, frankly, incredibly depressing. So I think a regenerative system also regenerates the people.
I love that. And thank you all for those good points. One of our colleagues that Zoe and I work with recently, he calls himself a words person. And he said, it's not the environment, it's our environment. And as this is the only planet that we know of that is in the universe that can support human life as we know it, we owe ourselves to take care of our environment. So because it is our home. And since you cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet, those systems that depend on infinite growth need to change. We are working through the figuring out of the change, but there is a great opportunity for those who would be innovators and problem solvers in this space to create big and transformational opportunities. So I want to thank everybody for joining for your time, for our time. I want to thank the team for sharing their wisdom and time and treasure, and for Kaz for helping us get this all together. Thanks again for another great monthly episode of Throughline Thursdays. We will share the video with everyone who signed up and attended, and we'll connect folks for those who are trying to connect and don't have a means to reach out or don't have the right email. And I have one question that we didn't answer, or maybe two, but I think that's Ryan, and we will try and get back to you and answer your question. Again, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks, Kaz. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye, Zoe.